Now then, we need to record a show, do we, instead of cocking about?
Pretty good idea.
Okay, cool. It's important to me that 50 and coping is seen as positive, but also to see it positive, you need to see the bad, negative side of men's mental health. And there is a lot of negativity around the subject, but also when you get involved in your own life, there are times where you can't cope and you can't deal with it. And the most important thing, as I've said 100 times, is that we find a coping mechanism. So today, on my left is Joe, and on my right is Lee. Joe, nice that you're here, mate. Thank you so much for coming. You're a paramedic.
That's right, yeah.
So can you explain and tell everyone what you do?
Yeah,
and who you are?
So yeah, like I say, I'm Joe, and I've been a paramedic now for 22 years. So a fair, good chunk of time, frontline work. So my role initially was going out and responding to 999 calls, and I've worked my way up through the sort of ranks now, and I'm an officer now. So I only go out to the big shit jobs, the trauma, the deaths, really. So a lot of my work's involving now is just the big jobs that go on in our area and supporting staff on them. Okay,
so when you first started your frontline soldier, as it were, obviously being in that trade, you're going to see some pretty horrendous things.
Yeah.
When you first started, how old were you when you first started?
So I'd have been 21.
So you're 21 years old.
Yeah.
Haven't got an awful lot of experience in life. It's your first job, is it? Or
I was a mechanic before.
A mechanic?
Yeah.
Yeah, because that makes perfect sense. Because obviously when you go from mending cars, you can then go to mending people.
Absolutely.
That's bloody awesome, that is. Right, so when you first started, what was your initial reaction to seeing the blood, to seeing the trauma, to seeing human beings suffering?
Do you know what? It was, they don't give you much of a prep before you go out front line. You have like an initial 12-week training course, and then you're dumped on the road with a experienced paramedic or technician. Yeah. And there's no filter on what calls come through. Whatever call comes through, you're going to be going to. And I remember my first couple of weeks, I didn't do much at all, really. A lot of nanas down and the worried well and things like that. It was only when I think I attended my first deceased patient, I realised this crazy world that is ambulance life, what it was I was entering. And we're very privileged. We get to see the scenes of some incredible sights that, that are unfortunately people's worst days. Sometimes it's their best days, but there isn't a lot of prep for the role we do. No. You hit the floor running, and before you know it, you are just ingrained in this very, very weird life. Yeah. I mean, it's not normal to see. I mean, you talk about trauma, so nanas falling down is trauma to them. Yeah. Death and anything to do with that is traumatic to both you and the families and all of that. How do you learn to cope? I mean, this is the biggest question in the universe, but you're 21 years old, you're starting out, and then you see your first death. Is there a way to prepare yourself for that, or do you have to just deal with that at face value? So back then, 20 odd years ago, it was very much face value. You'd go back, you'd have a fag, you'd speak to your mates, and it was a case of dig deep, get on with the next job. This is the role you've joined. So when I think about my early days and my first, deaths, my first suicides, my first fatal road traffic accidents, dead children, it was a case of we went back, we had a cup of tea, we went out and cracked on with the next job. Yep. It is a lot more structured now.
Was there no support system in the job?
Nothing.
What? Nothing at all?
Nothing at all.
Not even some weird health and safety HR executive being creepy in the corner?
Nothing. There was literally nothing. When I joined the ambulance service, you dealt with what you were given, and it was that stiff upper lip, you crack on with the next job. There was no support whatsoever. Yeah.
Wow, that's okay. That renders you speechless, does it not? I mean, you're in a situation where you are going to have to negotiate two things: one, other people's trauma, and two, cause and effect your trauma from that situation. Yeah. And if you have no frame of reference, then how do you cope?
So the coping mechanism in the ambulance service is very much, I think this is probably why, from a mental health point of view, our suicide rate within ambulance service paramedics technicians is incredibly high. Right. Not publicised as high as it is, but it's incredibly high. Yep. The mental health within our ambulance service is through the roof, because I describe myself as sponges, really. We're absorbing bits of water every day, and you get to the point where you're so full up, where you haven't had a chance to sort of rinse out through the months and months of trauma you're dealing with. You get to the stage where you're so full you can't take on anymore.
That's an amazing way to put it. You're like a sponge, every day taking little bits, and it might take you a month, it might take you 10 years, but one day you're going to go bang.
You will go bang, yeah. And when you go bang big.
Okay, so talk to me about when you went bang. Tell me the situation you were in. Obviously, we don't need names. We don't need to endanger anyone's privacy. Yeah. But if you can tell me what happened to you, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, of course. So suicides for me have always been a job that I hated. And it stems back from one of my very first ones. A couple of years into a job, I remember we got called to a male hanging in the woodlands near where I worked.
Right.
And I remember trekking through the woods for about 2-3 miles, pitch black. There's blue lights everywhere. I can visualise it today. I can even remember like the leaves crunching under my foot as I walked through the woods.
Right.
And we eventually found the location, and this male was still hanging in the trees. And it was the most traumatic thing I'd ever seen. I'd never seen anything so visually disturbing in my life. It was a real big hit for me.
Right.
So we did what we needed to do at scene. We headed back to where the ambulances were, and I remember there was a van parked up, which we realised was the guy's van, and I thought I'd go over there and just check it and check what was inside it, see if there's any ID or anything. And there was something in the van that I'll never forget, and it was his dog. It was a puppy.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as an animal lover, you guys animal lovers, and
yeah.
You know, for me it was like, shit, this is reality. This poor dog is going to. It's the first thing. It's like, albeit an animal.
Yep.
I can see how distressed this dog is. The guy's wife hasn't been told yet. The guy's brother hasn't been told yet. The guy's friends haven't been told yet. So I knew this ripple effect was going to be catastrophic for hundreds of people, probably, if there's one deceased.
Yeah.
So from that day onwards, suicides have always been a huge part of the job I hate.
Yep.
And then over the years now, I was thinking about it before coming here today. I reckon I've done over 1,000 probably suicides now in my career, for all different levels, from all ages, from my youngest being 7 right up through to their 90s.
Suicide at 7?
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
I mean, right, if nothing else, that should show everyone listening or watching to this the extent that suicide exists.
Yeah.
It should also show that how much pressure you guys in those ambulances are under. And a lot of the time with that, you know, you're not given the easiest ride by the general public either, are you? You know, if you've got step-by-step rules. I mean, we'll go into that later. So suicide is the focus on the bad side of the job.
Yeah.
So how did you get to where it affected you so badly it became an issue?
Yeah. So I had to deal with, from a management point of view now, or officer point of view, I had to deal with an incident at work that led to someone being removed from the workplace.
Okay.
Which was a tough thing to go through anyway.
Were they suspended or fired or?
At that stage, nothing happened at all. There was just an investigation starting. It's very, very early days. But the day after the investigation started, this guy hung himself. A friend of mine.
The day after the investigation started?
The day after the investigation started, yeah, he hung himself. Yeah. So he was told that there's an investigation starting. He's obviously gone home that night and decided to hang himself. And I got called to him the following day. It's my first job of the day.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
So this is your friend?
Yeah.
Who, because he's been reprimanded, or not even reprimanded.
At this stage, he's
so
innocent.
it's the start of the process.
Very start.
Okay. I have to ask, I don't want to be a journalist, but do you think the suicide was spurred by the fact that he did something wrong and he knows that? Or was it just the pressure put on him by that situation?
And do you know what? I'm really glad you asked that point, Fu. And I've done so much research into it now to try and understand the sort of rationale behind these sort of spontaneous decisions to take your own life.
Yeah.
And the evidence out there is so high now that it's not normally mental health problems that had led to it. It's just coping mechanism on whatever specific day.
Yeah.
And I believe in this particular case, it was an overwhelming amount of information that he couldn't cope with on that specific day.
Okay.
And I absolutely believe that, and I backed that up with the children that I went to that had a very small online debt on their app on their phone. They didn't want to tell their mum and dads. You know, an online debt isn't a mental health problem.
No,
you know,
it's a first world problem.
It's a first world problem.
So that's interesting as well. Okay, obviously we concentrate on men's mental health, but I mean, just because you have a mental health problem does not mean that you will commit suicide. And the other side of that coin is suicide is not always spurned by mental health. That's a really interesting thing. Sometimes life, just in that moment, gets too much. Without being melodramatic, there have been times in my life through drug use and then afterwards where you feel like you're not enough and you feel like your life, people would be better off without you.
Yep.
And I've had that thought. I have said out loud in my car, always in my car, on my way, people would be better off without me if I was dead. Obviously, I've not actioned that, obviously. Probably because I don't want to leave those people behind. So what happened as a result of your friend's suicide?
So after his suicide, I developed a really, really strong visual disturbances. So I basically, I think the easiest way to explain it is, after all the suicides I've been to, I ended up, my brain focused every single one with his face on it. So I couldn't go into the woods and walk my dog without seeing him hanging in every trees.
Okay.
I was going to bed at night with my wife and he was next to me. I was going through therapy and he was on the sofa laughing and prodding me. So for me, it turned into a huge, just a massive amount of visual PTSD that my brain interpreted.
Okay, so how did these things appear to you? You know, he sat on the sofa next to you, poking you. Is that real in your mind?
Absolutely, 100%.
But you know that's not possible.
Now,
so your mind, but at the time it was very real.
Very real.
So you would literally wake up in the morning and he's in bed.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's terrifying, man.
Yeah. Every time I couldn't. I still to this day now remember going through the woods and every tree had him hanging in it, and it was incredible. Yeah, and it's a real hard thing to deal with. In fact, it was too hard to deal with.
So were you still functioning then, though?
I was functioning, but the only way I was functioning was the only way I could stop seeing him was booze. Oh. Because booze is the best anaesthetic in the world. I mean, we used to use it in operations, didn't we, in the 30s and things like that, you know, knock people out. So booze was the only thing that stopped me seeing this particular guy. So guess what happens? You end up drinking more.
Yeah. So you're saying that when you were drinking, when you achieved a level of drunkenness, presumably, then at no point did this guy come?
No.
Wow.
No.
Okay.
It's the only time because I just anaesthetise myself to sleep.
Okay, I can entirely relate by using a substance or a drink to get through. How did you carry on working? How did you make your life carry on? Did nobody around you at work point and say, "Hold on, are you all right?"
You know, I'd like to say yes, they did, but they didn't. There was the standard, you know. There's a standard sort of visits from senior management and things like that. The problem I had, Jim, was that because this was an investigation going on, I couldn't talk about it.
No.
So from my point of view, I couldn't share with my colleagues what had happened. The whole of my station were grieving the loss of this wonderful paramedic, which he was.
Yeah.
Yet I had an internal fight going on that I knew this huge chunk of information that no one else knew.
Right.
And it was very, very difficult to try and share my grief with people that are grieving for a completely separate reason.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, it does. Yeah. Absolutely. You have a different agenda provided by your knowledge.
Yeah.
Right. Where everyone else was able to take it at face value.
Yeah. So I guess in that situation, people are seeing everyone else grieving and understanding that.
Yeah.
And therefore not really understanding why you're going through what you're going through, other than it being grief.
Yeah.
And maybe seeing a more extreme reaction and wondering. Well, maybe probably not even wondering, I guess, because people are generally ignorant, aren't they? But yeah, so you're then coping with that entirely on your own.
Yeah, or not coping, as the case was.
No.
Yeah,
so having to try to cope with it.
Trying to cope with it, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
When did that come to a head?
So it got to a stage where I knew the only way I could stop seeing him was by ending my own life. So,
okay.
You know, as brutal as that is, and you know, I've had to have this conversation with family and friends, and I'm completely honest about it now. It's the only way I'm going to be able to change things going forward for people. Is I set up a plan. I knew that if I killed myself, I would never wake up seeing this person again. I'd never be putting my family through the grief they're seeing me turn into this drunken mess.
Yep.
You know, all of the ways my behaviours are changing, it would all stop. It would just be a case of, oh, it's really sad, Joe's no longer around. So I decided to set up a plan and a date, and I had everything set to kill myself.
Okay, can I ask one thing, which is probably out of order, but you made a plan.
Yeah.
What was that plan?
So the plan was to put all my interests in place first. I wanted to make sure that my family had everything arranged for when I'd gone, my finances, not there was a huge amount, my bank details, my passwords. This is a real common trend in people taking life. They want to make sure that with their family going through a hell of a load of shit once one person's gone, you also want to make sure that you make the shit times a little bit easier for them. So I had things set up. I wanted to make sure that I did as much as I can to prove to the family that I was trying to make myself better. And that's where one of the things that my wife wanted to do, she wanted to send me paddleboarding. And it's crazy when I talk about paddleboarding and suicide, but how that happened was that I've been talking for years and years and years about wanting to do paddleboarding. Yep. So my wife said, look, if the only way we're going to get this guy out of the house is just get him a fucking paddleboard lesson. So it was one winter's day in 2020 that they sent me up to Willen Lake for a paddleboard experience, and it was that half an hour that changed my whole life, without doubt.
Okay.
It just happened to be paddleboarding.
Before we get to the end result, right? So when you're making this plan, I find it really interesting that because you know the trauma you're going to cause, yeah. In one way, you've provided like the easiness of providing passwords and everything things. But have you contemplated the actual trauma of what you would do to your family? Because you're providing information which you think is the answer. Is that the key to suicide? You think they'd be better off without you, or was it just that the situation had to stop for you?
For me, I had no worry about how it would affect them. I didn't think about that my kids would be, looking down at me, crying. My mum and dad would be there thinking, how do we not recognise it? Joe's the most unlikeliest person ever to take his life. So for me, I didn't think about anything at all about. All I thought about is I wouldn't see this particular person. I couldn't care about anything else.
So that one situation with that one person who was no longer there because they took their own life became such a focus of your life that you were willing to end it. And didn't think about the repercussions of that.
Absolutely not.
That's unbelievable. And that shows really strongly how suicide as an answer, one, doesn't have to be rational, but you still act rationally because of it. You still put your ducks in a row.
Yeah.
So your wife doesn't have to have the added, the bother of, finding out where your bank is or whatever. Wow, that shows the reality and the truth of that matter. Thank you for sharing. That's huge. Okay, right. So, if one more question, and this is kind of painful to ask, but you said you'd made a plan. How were you going to do it?
I was going to hang myself.
Right. Okay, that's where I was going. I wondered if you went the same way, because, obviously I'm putting thoughts in your head, but it makes sense to me that you would go the same way as your friend. Yeah. Because then it's balanced somewhere.
It's me almost. Yeah, almost. What's the word? It's almost not giving him something back, but it's feel like I have to do this because I'm part of.
He did it.
Yeah.
So that respect you're paying to your friend by ending your life the same way he did.
Yeah.
That in a misguided. No, that's misguided is the wrong word, but in a twisted view of life.
It's a twisted view. Yeah.
It's respectful to go the same way. Fucking hell, man. When you've been sent paddleboarding by your wife. Right, your wife knows you probably better than anybody else. Yeah. So she saw the fact that you needed to leave that house and not be trapped in your own head.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wives are very important creatures, right?
Yeah.
Right? And also, the important creatures in the world are the people that know you best, can see that you are struggling. Not necessarily the ones that want to step in, right, and change you or do anything about it, because most people have no clue how to change someone. They think going in and telling them what they need to do, right, will help. And I'll tell you now, that doesn't fucking help. What helps, though, is going back to what you and I have said 1,000 times about listening. So she's seen your behaviour, she's done that, and she's bought you a paddleboard lesson. Yeah. Presumably without a date and time put on it. It's just something you can choose.
Yeah.
Right.
And therefore didn't choose for some time, I guess.
Yeah, no, I didn't, because I didn't want to go out of the house. No. I was quite happy in the house, not seeing anyone. I felt embarrassed to go out. I felt guilty going out. I was just turning into a very poorly, lonely man. Yeah. And almost agoraphobic to a point.
How did you buy your booze?
Well, I insisted my family bought it for me all the time.
Right. Yeah. So they knew what was happening because
Yeah.
they could quantify the amount you were drinking.
Yeah.
You
I
see,
guess because in that situation, you, as the family member, you think you're supporting them, don't you?
yeah. I mean, that's it.
That's
There
what
is
they
no
need at the moment.
right. And don't get me wrong. There is no apportioning blame to your family.
No.
Right. Yes, they're facilitating you do. But what happens if you don't get that? They're thinking, right, this is what he needs to get through. At no point have they acknowledged the fact that you're becoming an alcoholic and this is detrimental, because they can't do that.
No.
Wow. So you're in this situation where your wife knows that you need to leave that house, and that might break the spell, because to an outsider who's not in it, it looks like a spell.
Yeah.
Right. You mentioned PTSD. Were you diagnosed with PTSD, or was that what you knew from your medical background?
So PTSD is a really interesting thing, because it's really hard to get. I think we've all got an element of PTSD. We've all been through trauma. You know, you've explained your traumas, and we've all got PTSD to a level. So I knew that what I was suffering from a clinical point of view was PTSD, and I went through therapy and medication and things like that. So I knew that I was suffering PTSD symptoms.
Right.
Did I get the final diagnosis? Yes, you've got it. I probably don't need it, that diagnosis. I don't need that label.
Right. That's interesting. That's why I asked.
Right.
Obviously, you have a medical background. This is what you do, right?
Yeah.
You are around all these professionals, but also the job situation you were in provided you with the PTSD in the situation you were in then.
Yeah.
So maybe you weren't looking for a label. Maybe you're not looking for a thing. You know what's going on.
Yeah.
Right. That consciousness to know, is even more damaging for you.
Yeah.
Because you know the end result and you've seen it 1,000 times. Which do you think? And I am clutching at straws, or even clutching at straws. Do you think at any point you decided suicide was the best option simply because you'd seen so many people end their lives and end their pain that way?
Absolutely, yeah. I read so many letters that have been left behind, and every time I read a letter now, even to last week I was reading a letter of a suicide, and you know, I can picture when they're explaining their reason why they have, you know, made this incredibly, I'm going to say brave, because it is brave, incredibly brave decision to end their life. You know, I read the letters and I think, I can sympathise with you. I get why you've done it. Can't condone it, but I get why you've done it.
Do you know what? That makes you so fucking valuable, doing what you do. I mean, I know it's after the fact, but also anyone you see with traits and behaviours, there is no prescribed response.
No.
Right? So there is no, well, there's a rule book, and the Poindexters say that if they're doing this, this and this, they're going to kill themselves.
Yeah.
There isn't. That's fucking not happening.
It's not happening at all. And do you know what? And one of the biggest things I always talk about is the amount of suicides I've been to. I can almost guarantee nearly 90% of them, I'll speak to the families afterwards and they all say the same thing. You wouldn't have thought it would have been him that done it or her that done it. They all say the same thing. And that is because when you go back to your mental health thing at the beginning of this, is because people with chronic mental health conditions, they are medicated and they actually live a whole really healthy life with their mental health illness. They might be medicated for it. They might have days where they feel suicidal, and statistics show that 1 in 5 of us have suicidal thoughts throughout our life. So they will live the whole life with a mental health illness, but they can cope with it. The people that I go to and I read and I speak to family, and they turn around and say, you would never believe it was him that done it, are the people that I can't cope with that particular day, and that's the problem.
I think if you've got a situation like your sponge analogy or metaphor where people function, right, and they function so well, no one ever questions whether they are actually functioning. And then you get to the stage where they can't take in any more water, and then one day there's a tipping point. And also, why is it seen by the world as a mental illness effect of suicide? Because there's a line drawn.
Because it's not rational, isn't it?
It's not spoken about enough.
Rationality, though, why? I mean, half of my life has had absolutely no rationality whatsoever. Right? I've said this before. I was diagnosed with PTSD due to an incident with guns and shooting and badness. Right? Now, at the time, I went, I haven't got fucking PTSD. What the fuck? You're just looking for a pigeonhole. Right? I was angry, and I was in a situation that death would have sorted out, not mine, possibly somebody else's, and then that's fine. Now, at no point during that situation did I think about killing myself. That was not the answer.
No.
I thought, and if I'm brutally honest, I thought that ending somebody else who was being aggressive towards me in an unfathomable way, that would be the answer.
Okay.
Right. But it didn't happen, by the way. I didn't kill anybody, just so everyone understands. But it was entirely rational to me that the end result of my actions, i.e. this other person's death, would cure my problem. I didn't think about going to prison. I didn't think how it would affect my family. Yeah, I'd had no wife and no kids at that point. Yeah. But I did have parents. I had my dad. My mum died, right, and other people around who cared for me. But if you look at it this way, the ending of life is final, and there are consequences. Now, if you commit suicide, the consequences, obviously, for you, you're not going to care about because you're dead. Yeah. And none of us know what happens after life, right? And if anyone does, let me know. But also, the consequences then are huge for the family. Kids who have parents who commit suicide then start playing the blame game. And this doesn't go away. This spreads forever. So, important point is that it's not a rational thing. It's an I can't cope and I've had enough thing, which doesn't always link to mental health problems.
No, it doesn't.
That's a fantastic thing to find out. I didn't even think about it.
No, and why would we? We don't. It's like, you talk about this ripple effect too with suicide. It is, whoever's done it has done it, but the ripple effect, which will lead to later of generations of poor mental health and anxiety and things like that. The ripple effect with suicide is incredible, and it's something that's not spoken about. And I think the work I do now is I want suicide to be talked about like. I relate to a Roman Kent book he wrote about. He lost his real good friend to suicide, and he talked about like in the 80s, we had AIDS was a big thing, wasn't it? No one would talk about AIDS. There's a big picture of Princess Diana holding a kid's hand with AIDS, and now there's like loads of research gone into AIDS, and people live healthy lives with it and things like that. Then in the 90s, it was like cancer, and it was like the big C. No one wanted to say the word cancer. It was just like everyone's got the big C. But then they chucked a load of money into it, a load of research, a load of education, and people now openly talk about cancer and things like that. And that's where we need to be with suicide. We need to be talking about it every day.
Yeah. Take away the stigma of it. Also, right, I hate to bang on about religion. Roman Catholic Church, you do not get into heaven or the perception of wherever you go if you commit suicide. You are not allowed to be blessed on your death by a Roman Catholic priest. I don't know the total ins and outs of it. My sister will probably punch me in the face because I've got it wrong because she's Catholic. But look, I'm not trying to be offensive. What I'm saying to you is that Roman Catholics see suicide as a sin. Right, at one point, a third of the world was Catholic. Right? Now, you look at the knock-on effects of that. Right? You have to remember that the Church of England only exists because Henry VIII wanted to get another divorce. Right. Okay, so you take about that. Now, all of the teachings are still Catholicized. They're still God teachings from Christianity, right? You think about the knock-on effect of somebody who has that Catholic belief committing suicide, right? I'm not going to get to heaven. I'm going to be in purgatory for the rest of my life. Perjury? Do I mean that?
I think so.
Anyway, that'll do.
That's it.
So, by society's construct, suicide is seen as something taboo. It's seen as something that is intolerable to society. Yeah. Fuck all that. Yeah. If you've had enough and you kill yourself because you can't take it, then society has a responsibility to get to you first.
Yep, absolutely right.
The only way to get to you first is to promote the fact that you need to tell someone what's happening. Yeah. And if we take away the stigma of society, right? If somebody says, look, I'm having suicide thoughts, instead of going, you'll be all right, just to get a good night's sleep.
I'll take you out for a drink.
Yeah.
Let's go and have a drink.
Yeah, let's go and have a drink.
Yeah.
Oh, fucking hell.
And you know what? This is the thing. By just asking someone, do they like, if someone comes into work now saying they're feeling unwell or anything, the first question they ask them is, do you feel suicidal? Do you want to end your life? Because it brings the subject to normality straight away. It's like, shit, I've been thinking about it.
It's the same as saying to them, are you going to puke?
Absolutely that, yeah.
Right, so I don't feel well. Right, are you going to puke?
Yeah.
Normal question.
Yeah.
Right, listen, I'm struggling. Do you feel suicidal? Then you can help them, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Because also it has to be said that if somebody's decided that's the end, maybe they won't be susceptible to help. But we should fucking try as human beings. Sorry, I'm swearing a lot, but it's important.
It's important.
I have to say that you coming onto this show has opened my eyes to a whole other side of it.
Oh, good.
And that's amazing. I don't know it all, and actually that's what 50 and Coping is about. That Lee and I get to learn about all these situations that we don't understand. Paddle boarding. Let's loop back to that.
Yeah.
Right. Your wife, being the clever lady that she is, gave you this thing. You waited for a while.
Yeah.
But then you did it. Right. What? Right. First question: why did you do it? Why did you decide to do it?
I'm really glad you asked me that, because I decided to do it because I felt like I had to do something for her before going.
Right. So it wasn't for you.
No. Oh God, no. This is like, this is the whole. I need to do my bit to make sure everyone thinks that I've done all I can before going. And she was like, Joe, I want to get you out of the house. I want to go paddleboarding. I'm going to buy you a paddleboarding lesson. So for me, I felt it was the right thing to do for her to go paddleboarding.
Right. Oh, yeah.
So expecting really not to enjoy it, you were just doing it.
It was to do it to please her completely. Wow. Yeah.
Just paying lip service to enjoyment to get out of the house.
Yeah.
That's really powerful message as well, right? Trying to make everyone else feel better because you'd already made the decision. You felt better already. You knew there was an end coming.
Oh God, I was looking forward to it because I wouldn't have to see him anymore.
Because I wouldn't have to deal with that shit. Oh my God. So, right, you get on a paddleboard and from what I've heard, there's an epiphany happens.
Yeah.
Explain what happened to you.
So I had this 30 minutes on a paddleboard with a bunch of kids that, half my age. I was the oldest bloke there, in an ill-fitting wetsuit on a cold lake in Milton Keynes, and
it sounds like Nirvana.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It does. Yeah.
Can't imagine why you didn't want to do it.
Yeah. What were you thinking?
And I got up on this paddleboard, and it was the first time in years I didn't think about anything in the world other than balancing on his board. I didn't think about debt. I didn't think about suicide. I didn't think about family problems, work problems, life problems. All I had to focus on was keeping upright on his board because I didn't want to fall in the water. So my mind was completely clear apart from balance for 30 minutes.
Right.
And I wanted more of those 30 minutes.
It has to be said, right, that not everyone is lucky enough to have that epiphany.
No.
But where does that lead you? So when you went on land and you took off your shonky wetsuit and you put your clothes back on and you're in the car, were you with anyone?
No, I was on my own. Did it on my own.
That journey back in the car to your house, what's going on in there?
The only thing I could keep thinking about was I need more than 30 minutes. I've got a lifeline here that will give me more than 30 minutes. Was that a conscious recognition? 100%.
That you knew that this could be a lifeline?
Because I haven't had 30 minutes for months and months and months of the break.
So that peace that you found.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's it.
Great.
Yeah.
Holy fuck. Because if you hadn't have found that peace, I hate to bring this, you wouldn't be talking to me now.
No, I'll be 4 years dead now.
So did you decide at that point you're not going to commit suicide? Or did you say that there's a chance you might not?
Do you know what? I didn't even... all I knew was I wanted more of those 30 minutes, and I just had it in my head, I want more of these 30 minutes, and...
so the focus has shifted?
Just completely shifted.
Wow.
I just wanted to get back out in the water. And I went home that night and fleeced a credit card with everything I ever needed to go paddleboarding. It all turned up
instantly
like 2 days later. Instantly that night, I bought the whole lot. I wasn't even worried about the debt then.
Was there any kind of like emotional outburst with your wife or anything? Or was it all very calm?
Quiet, very, very quiet. I was so calm at this stage because I knew my life was ending. So I was literally the calmest I'd been in ages. So I knew that I wasn't going to be around this planet for much longer. But I just had this, I want more of those 30 minutes, let's order everything I need to go paddleboarding and see if this is the thing that changes me.
Right. Manic behaviour.
Yeah.
That's manic behaviour.
Yeah.
But manic behaviour gave you everything you needed to find that freedom. And I think consciously you had found a way to stay alive because you weren't... Right. If you're planning to kill yourself, there's an inner peace. And I've heard that talked about a lot. I've made that decision. Outside influences doesn't fucking matter. No. Right? So that decision is enough. It's almost... Right? And I'm not trying to be offensive. It's almost the pontification of the biggest pontification there is. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Well, yeah, but in your head, it's more than that because you've made that decision. Yeah. And the decision is the hardest thing. Once that is, there's a peace. There's a peacefulness about it. Was there any trauma caused by the fact that you decided to live? When was there a conscious thought that you decided to live? Maybe not that first time.
There was. So once I think it took a lot of talking therapy then. I had an amazing therapist that's sadly no longer with us anymore, but I had an amazing therapist that I then started talking to following this paddleboarding lesson. I then started engaging with talking therapy, which is something I haven't really done before. So we're talking weeks, months down the line. And it was only then really that I then started realising how close I was to not being here anymore. And that was a really frightening experience then.
Right. So then fear crept in.
Yeah.
Now that fear is probably the actual buffer
Yeah.
that kept you alive.
Yeah, 100%.
Because once you feel the fear again,
Yeah.
but it's a different fear, it's a
Yeah.
fear of all that death, and that can be the buffer.
Yeah.
Also, tell me if I'm right or wrong, you going home and ordering everything you needed for paddleboarding
Yeah.
shows that there's future,
Yeah.
where before there was no
None at
future.
all. No. And you're absolutely, when it comes to the fear side of it, you're absolutely right. And you know, when I've spoken to suicide survivors now, there's a guy, I can't remember the name off the top of my head, that jumped off the one of the London bridges, and he survived. But the second he knew it was the right thing to do, the second that man stepped over the edge, he knew it was the wrong thing to do.
Yep.
And that's you know, for when you speak to survivors of suicide, you know, it is just that fogged vision of it's just do it, your life's going to be so much better, it's all over. And then the second, you know, these people take that step and survive, they realise straight away it was the wrong thing to do. Yeah, it was the wrong thing to do.
But by which stage? And a lot of people will go through that but end up dead.
They're not dead. Yeah. Especially hangings and trains. I mean, trains that, you know,
trains
hundreds have done trains. You know, there's no second chance of that.
One of my friends, Tom, I'm not going to say his surname, he killed himself in front of a train after a life of, you know, he was a brilliant musician,
Right.
but never had the, I don't know, never had the power in himself to get through. And he decided one day that was that, jumping on a train, because, and you know, we talked about it. And sadly, he did it 5 years after we split up. I went to London and ended up working, being a musician and doing all that. And he was left back. And then I came back to Hertford and found out he'd died and he'd done this. But he told me 5 years earlier how he would do it.
Right.
And we talked about it all, because I thought back then, you know, you talk to me about these things, you tell me everything, maybe that talking. And I've said this a lot to people, if you vocalise how you're feeling at that time, sometimes that can take the sting out of the reality of it. Now, sadly, he died, and I feel slightly guilty, which is misguided completely because I had no control of the situation. But he talked about the way he was going to do it because he'd made the decision to do it, but it took him 5 years to do that.
Right.
So there is no time,
No.
right, on how you do. Most people, if they've made a decision, you will see a happiness, a peacefulness, because there's an end in sight. I'm eternally grateful that you found that paddleboarding. That's amazing. Right, not everyone can be that, and it's not luck. I don't know what that is, but that's not luck, is it?
Yeah, it's not luck. No, it's just I don't know what it is.
Okay, I think we need to look at after that. Now, when you come out of drug abuse or drug addiction, you are obviously still an addict. I haven't made that mistake.
No.
But you have reformed yourself and you're in a position of strength in your own mind. So then you want to help others, or you want to be this fucking superhero,
Yeah.
right, to other people, because you know you can help them, because you can relate, right? Now, the reality of that for me was, I realised that I was a bit misguided and all that, and then calmed down a bit. My brother Sean, he does that,
Yep.
and came out of addiction. What I did, I thought the best thing to do was write music to explain what I was feeling. But you have taken on work with a charity, have you not?
Yeah.
So tell me first of all who the charity is and where they are and how you can find them, and we'll put that in the description below.
Amazing, yeah.
But also explain to me why your thought process getting involved.
Yeah, so the charity is called the Ollie Foundation. That stands for One Life Lost Is Enough.
Yep.
So this was set up in 2016 by 3 parents who all lost their teenage sons in the same year to suicide.
Yep.
They met at a bereavement group, and they set up the Ollie Foundation, which is now it's basically it's a charity that will provide suicide training, assist training for people, for employees, and so on and so forth, free at the point of access, almost a bit like the NHS really. They're devoted to breaking down the stigmas of suicide.
Okay.
And the reason I got involved with them was because I think me sharing my story is a massive part of therapy for me.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it probably is for yourself too. It's a huge part of therapy. And if I can save one life by normalising suicide, then I've achieved everything I need to achieve.
Yeah.
And I know I have already. I know I have, and I'm going to continue to do so.
That's huge. It's huge. You're stopping somebody from ending it.
Yeah.
Right? Now, obviously people die every day and blah blah blah, and people get blasé about it. I'll tell you this now, right? You decide to kill yourself, okay, and then, like you said, ripple effect on everyone else, but you do this thing, blah blah. The end result of suicide is the knock-on effect is huge to everyone around you. So, you know, if you just save one life, you're actually influencing hundreds of lives, and that's really important. What we might does the charity have a media department? Do they have someone who would come and talk to me?
Yeah, absolutely would. Yeah,
right, because I want to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm saying that now.
Yeah,
right. I have a problem with charities that are set up by people who haven't got a clue and haven't been there.
Yeah.
This charity is set up by people who have suffered the end result of their offspring committing suicide.
Yeah.
I am a father, right? He's only 9. Right, I could not fathom losing a child. I just can't. I couldn't cope, right? But luckily, you know, he's all right, and we do that. When you're looking at helping people, what is the most important thing to do? When, like, as a whole, when you're talking to the outside world, not individuals, because everything's different. How can we make that message important enough that people listen?
So I think what I tend to do is I describe 3 particular cases that I went to, and I'm happy to do that now if you allow. And it's a young lad, a 14-year-old with £140 online gambling debt, took his own life. It's a 16-year-old who shared a naked selfie with her boyfriend. Relationship finished. He shares the photo, gone viral. She ends her life. 3 weeks ago, a guy, £340 van damage to his work van. Boss said, you've got to pay for it. Living crisis at the moment, couldn't afford it. End his life. None of them had mental health problems.
No.
These couldn't cope. The thing I want to push is normalising suicide and just focusing on the people in your phone book that you think would never do it, and they are the ones we should be checking in on.
Okay. So I think fundamentally, if we look at a situation where you haven't heard from your mate for a bit, and normally you talk to them, you know, then it doesn't hurt just to pick up the phone or send a text message. And people say this all the time, and they go, whatever, what's that going to do? The difference is you have contact with other people. Your insular behaviour is broken for that minute.
Absolutely.
And that insular behaviour is what means that you're totally self-reliant, which means you can decide to end your life. I don't know whether I'm talking bollocks or not, but all I do know is that communication in all of these things, be it mental health problems or be it just the fact that you cannot cope in that instant, and that's all it can take from what you've been saying.
Absolutely, all it can take.
Right, I have to say as well, £140 gambling debt.
I know.
Hey, fuck. So, you know, right, then you can start playing a blame game, right? So you go, well, where with the parent? It doesn't fucking matter.
Don't matter.
In that moment, he had realised he could not cope with that.
Yep.
That van damage, I'd have told the boss to go fuck himself.
Yeah, get another job.
Go, who gives a shit? But I'm not them. He couldn't cope.
Moment, no, that day.
Right, understand this. Anyone can commit suicide.
Yep.
So there is no type. There is no personal trauma. There is no anything. Anyone, all of your friend group.
Yep.
If you haven't heard from your friends, and you normally hear from them every other day or every once a week, if that chain breaks, we need to reach out, right?
Absolutely right. Yeah. You could save a life by just sending that text message to your friend you haven't spoke to saying, is everything okay? Yeah. Do you want to catch up? Do you want to chat? Normalise the subject.
Don't ask them to go for a drink.
Don't ask them to go for a drink.
Okay. And I'm not that we all sniggered, but it's kind of serious. George, what time are we on, mate? Okay. Right, screw it. Screw time. When you took on this paddleboarding, is it a continual sense of peace that you still get? Are you still paddleboarding?
Yeah, so
I didn't know.
Like you didn't know. So after that, after I got the paddleboarding equipment, I set out and done a 20-odd mile for Mind charity, and you know, I got raised a few £100 or whatever it was. And
nice. Yeah,
and I thought, do you know what? The only way I'm going to put suicide prevention on the map is I have to do something big. And I thought the only thing I could think of at the time that would put it on the map and get BBC involved and get press involved was Paddleboard France.
Right, as you do. Yeah.
As you do, yeah.
Yeah. The only choice I've got.
Yeah.
Right.
So I did.
Wait.
Okay.
Across the actual channel.
Yeah.
Not in a swimming pool doing lengths equivalent. Paddleboarding.
So I set off from last year in September, I set off from Dungeness on the southeast coast, and I boarded all the way over to Boulogne. Yeah, raised about 12 grand for Ollie.
You didn't even do the fucking short bit.
No, I did the whole lot. No, went across, down and up. Yeah, yeah.
I don't know what to say to that. Now, he told me that you did that.
Yeah.
I assumed, stupidly, that nobody would paddleboard across the channel. I mean, you can't stay on. But, right, waves, wind, rain, the whole fucking thing.
Rain, wind, migrants, jellyfish, litter. 4 migrants boats, actually, which was a threat on its own.
Let alone the ships.
2 shipping lanes, yeah.
Okay. Boats with migrants in.
Yeah.
How many?
We saw 4. 1 was a threat to us. 2 were a threat to us, but we saw 4 in total. When I say a threat, I could see babies in the migrant boat. And these boats, I can try and explain one of these boats. And I know we're conscious for time. So
I don't give a shit about time. You tell your story. I don't give a shit.
This boat is a dinghy with a battery-powered handrail with a long rod and something with a guy at the back holding it. There's babies on it. So the babies are your bait. So they want you to go and check the babies over because you're going up to them. But the old ladies in the front with the masks all over are young, either whatever origin of people are on the boat, and they're the threat. They want my safety boat. That's what they want. My safety boat's got 2 big engines on the back, 2 guys on board. They want them fucking in the water, and they want them in there and disappear. So I was told to paddle off in a different direction, and they sort of circled it whilst immigration come and picked them up. So we had that 4 times. Now the biggest threat for us there was the fact that if they had a gun, they were going to easily just take me down, and then they got on paddleboard. So I didn't think of it as a threat. I thought I was literally really worried about them. But the migrants were one of the biggest threat for us across the channel. Yeah, we had four encounters.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
You don't. I mean, you know, you're breaking a record, right? You take that at face value. You're not expecting that kind of crap.
No.
Okay. You could have told me you actually went across the fucking channel, but it's not just. It's not. You know, where the hell is it? It's not Port
Dover to Calais.
Dover, Calais.
No.
I couldn't think of Dover then. How odd. That was that. I mean, I've been to France a lot.
Yeah.
Right. My father lives there. That's a bloody long way.
It's a long old way. Yeah.
Okay. How long did it take?
I did it. I was expecting to do it 11 hours, but I smashed it in 5 hours and 45 minutes. Yeah. Yeah, I know.
Okay. Did your paddleboard have an engine underneath?
It had a power drill.
Yeah, the power drill. Yeah.
Right. Well, one, congratulations. That's
Thank you. Yeah.
Huge.
Yeah.
Secondly, holy shit, what do you say to that? So what's next?
Well, I've done next.
Oh, you've done next.
Yeah. So next is 3 weeks ago, I managed with a guy called David Hayes. We managed to complete a world record, and that was the length of the non-tidal Thames. So the record was 59 hours non-stop paddling over 208 kilometres right through the day and night, and we beat the world record by 13 hours. We smashed it in 44 hours non-stop paddling. We had hours sleep in the whole 44 hours. Paddle right through day, night, no support boat, no lights, nothing.
Everyone sat here with their mouth of George bit on the cameras is like, you what? Mate, you have nothing but my respect. What an amazing achievement. Also, to put yourself in the situation across the channel, and also, you know, just sleep deprivation and that kind of bodily movement for that long puts you at danger. So, you know, thank you for doing that for other people.
It does. You know? It does put you in danger. But the biggest thing I learnt on that whole thing is how powerful our mind is. I'm not fit enough to do. That's 5 marathons back to back on a paddleboard I'd done 3 weeks ago, whenever it was.
Right.
I'm not fit enough to do that. I couldn't do a 10k run today. This was complete positive thinking for 44 hours non-stop.
I'll give you a fucking clue. You are, because you did.
But my mind did. I'm not fit enough.
Right, so you're saying that your mind's
100%.
completely just said, I've got to do this because I've got a fucking passion.
Everyone's behind me. I've got people waiting for me at the end. I've got the charity.
Just have interest. Was it what would be the problem with failing? What would have happened to you personally if you'd have failed?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
Have a look at that.
Yeah,
because
there's something in that. Yeah. I don't know.
Because you can't do it all, and mostly when those things fail, it's through no fault of your own.
Yeah.
My God, what a man! Nice one. You brought him in.
I know, I did.
I need people to understand the reality of what you went through, how you came out of it, and what you're continuing to do to normalise suicidal thinking. And I anything I can do, which is nothing apart from
this
promote
is massive.
Right, well, there are two things that I would like. One, I need you to keep in touch,
Yeah.
and then we can publicise anything you do in the future.
Amazing.
We don't have a huge following, but we do have an audience.
Amazing.
My own perception of what you've done is unbelievable bravery. And again, thank you for doing that for people, because there aren't enough people in the world who are selfless enough to do what you did. But also I realise that it's not totally selfless.
No.
This keeps you on an even keel and alive.
Absolutely.
And
100%.
that's the most important thing. If you do something for your own self-need as well as others, that's not selfish, that's very brave, that's very open, and to be commended at all points by a pompous arsehole who can't formulate a sentence, which is me. But listen, we do have to end.
No.
I think we should talk again.
I'd love to.
Right, so maybe if we can get your charity,
Absolutely, yeah.
tell me what they're called again.
The Ollie Foundation, One Life Lost is Enough.
Okay, I want to talk to them if they'll talk to me.
They will, yeah.
I think that's one of the most amazing shows we've done, and you blow my mind.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you, guys.
Tell anyone that will listen to you, normalising suicide is important. Tell people around you that you will listen if they need you, because the stigma that stops people telling their friends that they're in trouble is because they don't want to be a burden. Now, in your own mind, you're thinking, oh, that's not a burden, that's fine, they can talk to me. Voice that. Yeah? You don't have to save the world. You just have to tell your friends and your circle and your family that you will listen. You also don't need to do that fucking infuriating thing that's on Facebook. I'll always listen, I'll do that, share it. It's bullshit. Tell your immediate friends and family that you're there for them. Strangers on Facebook don't need your help, right? Because it's faceless. People who look you in the eye and know about you and trust you will take your contact as a plus point, a bonus. Something that they may or may not decide suicide's the way forward. And if you can stop that, that's amazing. But just talking about it to everyone, that creates a situation where it grows in society. And I'll tell you this, one person can't change the world, but one person telling other people about suicide, how to help, can help everyone. Because if enough people do it, that community can change the world. And I strongly believe that. 50 and Coping. We'll see you next time.